안녕하세요.
Seoul, a vibrant city that never sleeps. At the top of one of the city's most imposing skyscrapers, CEO Kang Ji-hoon gazed at the landscape with a cold and calculating expression. The owner of a billion-dollar empire, he was known for his ruthlessness in business and emotional detachment. Nothing and no one seemed capable of shaking his impeccable composure. Until that day, at the reception of Kang Group, Yoon Ha-yoon organized some files, trying to stay focused despite the frantic pace of the day. Simple, dedicated, and with a gentle smile, she worked hard to support her family. From a young age, she had learned that only through effort could she survive in such a competitive world. Even though she was just an ordinary employee, her presence radiated warmth, something that contrasted sharply with the cold and methodical environment of the company. "You need to deliver these reports to the CEO personally, Ha-yoon," her supervisor said, pushing a stack of papers into her hands. Her heart pounded. Facing Kang Ji-hoon, no employee wanted to be within 3 meters of him if they wanted to keep their job. Taking a deep breath, she headed to the executive floor. The CEO's floor was completely different from the rest of the building. Silence reigned, interrupted only by the controlled footsteps of well-dressed executives and secretaries. The atmosphere was intimidating. Straightening her posture, Ha-yoon walked up to the large mahogany double doors and knocked lightly. "Enter." The deep, commanding voice came from inside the room. Ha-yoon opened the door, stepping into an imposing space with large windows and minimalist decor. At the center, behind a pristine desk, sat Kang Ji-hoon, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. "Leave the documents on the desk and go," he said without looking up. Unaware of the coldness in his tone, Ha-eun stepped closer than she should have. As she extended the papers, her hand accidentally brushed against a pen, sending it rolling across the desk. Reacting quickly, she bent down to pick it up, but in doing so, she unintentionally knocked over a nearby cup of coffee. The dark liquid spilled onto Ji-hoon's pristine, tailored suit, staining the fine fabric. The silence that followed was deafening. Ha-yoon's eyes widened in pure horror. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. It was an accident." She quickly pulled a tissue from her pocket and leaned forward to clean the mess, but Ji-hoon pushed her hand away, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" His voice was icy, dripping with authority. Ha-yoon swallowed hard. She could feel the weight of the tension in the air, but instead of backing down, she held her ground. "I already apologized. I can arrange for another suit for you," she said, trying to sound professional, though her heart was racing. Ji-hoon, accustomed to submission and fear, raised an eyebrow. There was a hint of defiance in her voice. Any other employee would be bowing and begging for forgiveness by now. But Ha-yoon didn't avert her gaze, as if refusing to be intimidated. He could easily fire her on the spot. Yet for some reason, something held him back. He exhaled heavily and ran a hand through his hair. "Get out. Now." His voice was firm, but something in it seemed different. Blushing and mortified, Ha-yoon hurried out of the room, her face burning. "Idiot, idiot, idiot," she muttered to herself as she returned to her desk. Little did she know that at that very moment, Kang Ji-hoon was also lost in thought. For the first time, an ordinary employee had caught his attention. For the first time, Kang Ji-hoon found himself thinking about someone other than himself. The days that followed were marked by a strange tension at Kang Group. Ha-yoon tried to ignore the incident with Ji-hoon, but it seemed that every time she lifted her head, she found his intense gaze on her. It was as if he were trying to decipher something in her, something even she didn't understand. Ji-hoon, on the other hand, felt unsettled by his own distraction. He never allowed feelings or people to interfere with his routine. So why did he keep remembering Ha-yoon's determined expression? Why did her simple words still echo in his mind? On a seemingly ordinary morning, Ha-yoon was unexpectedly called to deliver documents directly to the CEO. Her heart beat faster, but she took a deep breath before entering the office. As she opened the door, she found Ji-hoon at his desk. His eyes locked on his computer, but clearly aware of her presence. "Sir, here are the documents you requested," she said, keeping her voice professional. Ji-hoon slowly lifted his gaze and reached out to take the papers. However, in a brief moment of carelessness, their hands brushed lightly. A A sudden jolt ran through Ha-yoon's body, and Ji-hoon seemed equally affected. He quickly pulled the documents away, clearing his throat. "Sit down," he ordered, leaving no room for refusal. Ha-yoon hesitated but obeyed. He drummed his fingers on the desk before speaking. "How long have you worked here?" The question caught her off guard. 2 years, sir." Ji-hoon nodded slowly. "And we've never spoken before." "I'm not important enough to be on your radar, sir." Her response was honest and direct, which caused a faint smirk to form on the CEO's lips. Ha-yoon noticed the rare expression and almost got lost in it. Ji-hoon leaned slightly forward, intertwining his fingers. "Do you always say what you think?" Ha-yoon hesitated for a moment before answering. "I try to." Silence stretched between them, heavy, with something undefined. Then, as if realizing he was straying too far from his own nature, Ji-hoon leaned back in his chair and returned his focus to the computer. "You may go." Ha-yoon left the room, her heart pounding. As she walked back to her desk, she tried to convince herself that it meant nothing, but deep down, a part of her knew that something had changed. Ji-hoon realizes he is dangerously close to crossing a line he never should. The following days became a silent game between Ji-hoon and Ha-yoon. He found himself watching her for no apparent reason, noticing how she interacted with others, how her presence seemed to brighten the room. And, to his frustration, Ha-yoon appeared completely unaware of the shift in dynamics around her, or perhaps she was deliberately trying to ignore it. That afternoon, Ji-hoon was walking through the company lobby when he spotted Ha-yoon carrying a heavy stack of documents. She struggled to balance them as she hurried along. It only took a second before a small misstep made her lose control. Before the papers could scatter across the floor, a firm hand grasped her waist, preventing her from falling. Ha-yoon's eyes widened as she realized she was mere inches away from Kang Ji-hoon. His woody scent was intense, and the piercing gaze he fixed on her made her hold her breath. "Do you always walk without watching where you're going?" His voice was lower than usual. Ha-yoon blinked rapidly, trying to regain her composure. I was in a hurry." Ji-hoon slowly released her waist, but his fingers lingered a second longer than necessary. He crouched down, picking up the fallen documents, and handed them to her without another word. Ha-yoon's heart pounded in her chest. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, turning to leave. But Ji-hoon called her name before she could step away. "Come to my office after work." She swallowed hard. "Did I do something wrong?" He shook his head, an unreadable glint in his eyes. "Just come." The rest of the day dragged on endlessly for Ha-yoon. What did he want? Was it a warning? A termination? Or something else? When the workday finally ended, she made her way to the executive floor with hesitant steps. She knocked on the door, and upon hearing the familiar "come in," she took a deep breath and stepped inside. Ji-hoon was at his desk, but the usual rigidness in his posture was absent. 2 cups of tea sat on the table. "Sit," he instructed, and she complied. He slid one of the cups closer to her. "You seem to like green tea, am I right?" Ha-yoon's eyes widened in surprise. "How do you know that?" Ji-hoon shrugged. "I notice things." The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. Ha-yoon shifted uncomfortably. "Why am I here, sir?" Ji-hoon intertwined his fingers and held her gaze. "Because I wanted to get to know you better." Ha-yoon's heart raced. She realizes that Kang Ji-hoon may be crossing a dangerous line. She isn't sure if she wants to stop him. The tension between Ji-hoon and Ha-yoon grew with each passing day. The CEO, always so distant and impenetrable, now seemed different, closer, more human, and that was beginning to stir whispers in the company's hallways. Ha-yoon tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the truth was that every encounter with Ji-hoon left her heart racing. He never made direct advances, but he was always nearby, offering small gestures that, to anyone else, would have seemed insignificant. To her, however, they were impossibly meaningful. The murmurs didn't take long to reach the wrong ears. At the end of the workday, Ha-yoon was summoned to the office of Director Kang Ji-hoon's mother. The woman, elegant and cold as an ice sculpture, sat in a luxurious armchair, scrutinizing the young woman from head to toe. "So you're Ha-yoon," Director Kang said. her voice sickeningly sweet. Ha-eun bowed respectfully. "Yes, ma'am. You called for me?" The woman smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "I'll be direct. My son has responsibilities. He cannot afford insignificant distractions. Do you understand what I'm saying?" A chill ran down Ha-eun's spine. "Director Kang, I don't know what you mean." "Oh yes, you do." The woman leaned forward, her gaze locked onto Ha-eun. "Don't be naive. I've seen the way he looks at you. But understand this, it means nothing. My son cannot throw away his future over a whim." Ha-eun swallowed hard but kept her posture firm. "If you think I'm trying to pursue Mr. Kang, you're mistaken. I only work here." Director Kang raised an eyebrow. "Then make things easier. Resign." Ha-eun felt the impact of the words like a blow. "What?" "It's not a request," the woman continued, smiling coldly. "It's an order. I'll arrange a generous compensation. You leave through the front door quietly, and everyone wins." Ha-eun's chest tightened. "Ma'am, I need this job. I've worked too hard to be here." Director Kang rose to her feet, exuding authority. "And my son has worked hard to get where he is. He will marry a woman of his standing. You know that, don't you?" Silence filled the room, suffocating. Ha-eun felt her hands trembling, but she didn't respond. She knew that nothing she said would make a difference. Now, Ha-eun faces a cruel choice: fight for her place or disappear before it's too late. Ha-eun walked out of Director Kang's office, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The woman's cold and calculated words echoed in her mind. Resign. But how could she give up everything she had worked so hard for? And more than that, how could she ignore what she felt for Ji-hoon? As she walked through the company's hallways, her heart pounded as she spotted Ji-hoon standing near the elevator. His gaze softened when he saw her, but his brows quickly furrowed as he noticed her troubled expression. "Ha-eun, what happened?" She hesitated, battling the urge to tell him everything. "Nothing, Mr. Kang. Just a tiring day." He didn't believe her. "Don't call me Mr. Kang when we're alone," he said, his voice lower, more intense. "Come with me." Without giving her room to protest, Ji-hoon led her to his car. The night in Seoul was cold, and the silence between them was tense. He drove to a secluded restaurant, far from prying eyes. As soon as they sat down, Ji-hoon fixed his gaze on her. "Now tell me the truth." Ha-eun sighed. "Your mother called me to her office. She asked me to leave the company." Ji-hoon's eyes darkened, his expression turning stormy. "She did what?" "She thinks you're getting distracted by me," Ha-eun said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And she believes you have a future already planned on that doesn't include someone like me." Ji-hoon ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "She has no right to decide that." Ha-eun looked at him, her chest tightening. "But she's right, isn't she? Your world and mine, they're so different." Ji-hoon reached for her hand across the table. "I don't care what she thinks. What matters to me is you. I know what I feel, Ha-eun, and I know you feel the same." Ha-eun felt her eyes sting with unshed tears. "It's not that simple. You could lose so much because of me." Ji-hoon tightened his grip on her hand. "Then let me lose it. But I won't lose you." The world seemed to blur around them. The weight of the choice rested heavily on Ha-eun's shoulders. But was she willing to risk everything for this love? Ji-hoon decides to confront his family, but the price of defying his fate may be higher than he ever imagined. Ji-hoon's decision sent shockwaves through the Kang family. The next day, he faced his mother in a private meeting. Director Kang, accustomed to ruling over everything with an iron fist, was furious. "Are you really willing to throw everything away for an employee?" she snapped, her voice heavy with disapproval. Ji-hoon stood his ground. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm simply making my own decisions, and you need to accept that." The woman let out a bitter laugh. "And what if I don't?" Ji-hoon crossed his arms. "Then you'll have to learn to deal with it. I love Ha-eun, and I won't leave her. If you can't support my happiness, then maybe you don't care about me as much as you claim to." Director Kang fell silent, clearly shocked by her son's unwavering stance. For the first time, she realized she could no longer control him. Ji-hoon walked out of the room without looking back. Meanwhile, Ha-eun had made up her mind to leave the company. She didn't want to be the reason for conflicts. But before she could hand in her resignation letter, Ji-hoon appeared before her. He took her hands and looked deeply into her eyes. "If you leave, I will follow you, wherever you are. But I'd rather we stay together here and now. There's nothing stopping us." Ha-yoon saw the sincerity and love in his eyes. For the first time, she felt she could believe in it. The weight she had been carrying dissolved, and she nodded, holding back her tears. Months later, Seoul's high society was left in shock by the unexpected marriage between Kang Ji-hoon and a mere employee from his own company. But Ji-hoon didn't care about the gossip. He held Ha-yoon's hand with pride as they walked down the aisle. Ha-yoon, dressed in white, smiled as she met the eyes of the man who had defied everything for her. They knew they would still face challenges, but together, they were unbreakable. And so, the billionaire CEO and his beloved proved that true love conquers all.